The wind was dry and full of dust. The land was broken, cracked like old glass. Nothing green had grown here for many years. The sky above was red and silent. Leary stepped carefully between the rocks. She wore a thin cloth across her face to block the dust. Her skin, a soft gray blue, was marked with old tribal paint, faded from heat and age. Her eyes searched the land for signs of life. She carried a small pack with a few water drops left. Her legs were shaking. She had been walking for 2 days without rest. Her people, the Veyari, were dying. Crops had failed. The rivers were poisoned. The elders spoke of old times when the skies were soft and rain would fall. But those days were gone. Leary was a scout, trained to search the far lands for help. She had found nothing, only bones and silence, until now. She saw it on the edge of a ruined outpost, a small camp. Smoke rose from a fire. Tools were scattered across the ground. Someone was there. Leary stepped closer, her hand on the short blade by her side. Her heart beat fast. She had heard of humans long ago, travelers from another world who once came and then vanished. Most Veyari thought they were myths. The figure stood with his back to her. He wore rough clothes, made from strange cloth. His arms were strong, his hair was messy. He was working with metal pieces near a broken machine. He turned slowly and saw her. They stared at each other. Leary did not move. Her legs were tired. Her mouth was dry. Her vision was swimming. Then she fell. The ground hit her hard. When she opened her eyes, the sky was darker. The red sun had dropped lower. The man was kneeling beside her. He held a metal cup and lifted her head gently. She tried to pull away, but her arms had no strength. He gave her water. She drank it. The taste was clean. She coughed and looked at him again. His face showed no fear, only calm. He said something, but she could not understand. His voice was deep and steady. He helped her sit near his fire. He gave her a cloth for warmth and a small bit of dried food. She took it slowly. For a long time they sat in silence. Leary pointed to herself and said her name. He nodded. Then he pointed to himself and said, "Tom, Tom," a short name. She repeated it. He smiled. She pulled a stick from near the fire and drew a small circle in the dirt. Inside it, she drew the mark of her village. She made lines showing the dry river, the dead farms, and the mountain that blocked their path to better land. Her hand shook. She showed him the sign for sickness, then the sign for children, then the sign for death. Tom looked at the drawing for a long time. Then he stood and walked around the fire. He took a longer stick and cleared a space in the dirt. He began to draw. First, he drew the mountain she had shown. Then he marked a path around it. He drew small lines for wind, arrows for sunlight, and a wide curve for a river. He tapped the river twice and looked at her. Leary leaned closer. She did not know this path. She had never seen a river on that side. Her people had searched there once, many seasons ago. They found only rocks and dry holes. She shook her head. Tom pointed again. Then he held up his hand and showed 5 fingers, then pointed at the sky, then back to the drawing. He was trying to say the river came back after 5 turns of the sun. She was not sure, but something inside her felt hope. Tom stood and looked at the horizon. He spoke again, this time slower. His words were still strange, but his voice was kind. He walked to his bag and pulled out a water bottle. He gave it to her. Then he picked up a small metal tool and sat down beside the broken machine. He started to fix it again, as if their strange meeting was only a small part of his day. Leary watched the map he had drawn. Her eyes followed the lines over and over. Her people were starving. They had no future. If this man spoke true, If the water was still there, they had one last chance. She stood and touched his shoulder. He looked at her. She pointed to the map, then to herself. Then she placed her hand over her heart. Tom nodded. She would go back. She would tell them. The stranger had a plan, a path. Maybe hope had not died yet. Leary walked for 3 days back to her people. She carried a new fire inside her chest. Not anger or fear, but something stronger. Hope. Her body was tired. Her legs hurt. But her hands held tight to the small drawing she had copied from Tom's map. It was drawn on a cloth using burned wood. Simple lines and symbols. A path. A river. A sign for shelter. She reached her village at dawn. The gates opened slowly when the guards saw her. Her skin was dry and cracked. Her lips were cut. But she stood tall and went straight to the elder's tent. Inside, Elder Sen sat near the fire. His eyes were old but sharp. Around him stood the council and a few strong warriors. Leary dropped to her knees and held up the cloth. "I found a way," she said. "A human showed me." The room went silent. A warrior stepped forward. His name was Var. He had never trusted. "Outsiders. A human, you mean the ghosts who left us behind," he said. Leary looked up. "He is not a ghost. He is real. His name is Tom. He saved me." She opened the cloth and placed it on the ground. She pointed to the path and the river. She told them about the drawing in the dirt, the water he showed her, and the valley on the other side of the mountain. Elder Sen leaned forward. He studied the drawing without speaking. His fingers touched the symbols one by one. "You trust this stranger?" he asked. "I do," Leary said. "He speaks little, but his eyes speak truth." Sen nodded slowly. "You will guide a small group, 10 families. If this path is real, we will follow." The next day, the chosen families gathered. They packed food, tools, and blankets. The children stayed quiet. The parents looked nervous. Leary stood at the front with Var, 2 scouts, and a healer named Nara. The journey began. The first day was calm. They crossed the flatlands, passing dry trees and broken stone. Leary followed the map closely. Every turn, every hill, she checked against Tom's lines. That night they stopped near a dry creek. The stars above were bright. The wind was soft. Var sat near the fire, sharpening his blade. "If this path leads nowhere, we turn back," he said. Leary nodded. "If it leads to water, we live." On the second day, they reached a narrow path between 2 sharp hills. The air grew hot. The rocks burned their feet. But Leary showed them a shaded route Tom had marked. It was slow but safer. By sunset, they reached a broken wall, part of an old road. Leary smiled. She remembered this from Tom's drawing. They were on the right path. Nara gave water to the children and treated an old man's foot. Spirits were still low, but Leary could feel something shift. The map was working. On the third day, the ground began to rise. They walked into a dry valley surrounded by sharp stone. The heat pressed down on them like a weight. At midday, a strange shape appeared in the distance. A figure stood alone, holding a long stick, watching them. Tom. Leary ran forward. Tom raised his hand in greeting. His clothes were dusty. His face was calm. He pointed to a nearby rock and drew a quick shape in the dirt. Then he showed them a direction not on the map. Leary looked confused, but he tapped the dirt again and made the sign for wind. A storm was coming. She turned to the group. "He says we must move to the North Rock. It will shield us." Var crossed his arms. "And if he is wrong, then we risk the storm in the open," she said. "We trust him." They moved quickly. The sky darkened. The wind picked up. Dust began to swirl. Just as they reached the rock wall, the storm hit. Red sand blasted across the valley. The wind howled like a beast. But they were safe. Tom sat against the stone, silent as ever. He had saved them again. After the storm passed, the group looked at him with new eyes. Even Var said nothing. That evening, Tom took out a stick and drew again. He showed them a path that curved away from the mountain wall. A new trail. Leary studied it with him. He pointed at the rocks, then at the stars. He used his hands to show how the wind moved. He did not speak much, but every motion was clear. He was not a leader by title. But his hands had knowledge. His eyes had vision. That night, the Veyari families began to see him as something more than a stranger. He was a guide. Leary sat near the fire and watched him clean his tools. She thought of how simple his ways were. No long speeches, no loud commands. He drew in the dirt. He showed a better way, and somehow that was enough. The sun rose behind sharp rocks as the group packed their things. The storm had passed, but the sky was still filled with red dust. Tom stood beside a narrow cliff path, checking the ground with his boot. Leary walked beside him. Her hair was tied back, her face tired but focused. She watched him draw another line in the dirt. He circled a part of the path with a small rock. Then he made a cross symbol, pointing up at the sky. "He says the wind gets strong here," Leary told the others. "We must move early before the heat rises." The families nodded. Trust was growing, little by little. Even Var, the warrior, stayed quiet and followed Tom's lead. The group began to climb. The cliff path was narrow with sharp drops on both sides. The children were carried or held close. Dust blew around their feet, but Tom had chosen a path between the rocks that blocked most of the wind. By midday, they reached a flat place where broken metal pipes poked from the ground. An old Veyari structure, long abandoned. Tom searched through the wreckage and found a working water collector. It had not been used in years, but some drops remained inside. He passed the water to the youngest child first, then to the others. No one spoke. There was only the sound of dry lips drinking and deep breaths of relief. Later that night, they made a small camp in a hollow between stone towers. The fire was low. The stars were faint behind the red dust. Tom sat with his back against a wall. He cleaned a piece of equipment from his bag, a small device with blinking lights. Leary sat beside him. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. He looked at her, then at the children sleeping near the fire. He placed his hand on his chest and made a small motion, a symbol of heart and purpose. Leary understood. He did not need to speak many words. His actions were enough. The next morning, the group moved again. The path grew steeper. Rocks crumbled under their feet. At one point, a mother slipped. Her child nearly fell down the slope. Tom rushed forward. He grabbed the child with one arm and held the mother steady with the other. Dust flew into the air, but no one was hurt. Var came forward and helped them climb the last step. He looked at Tom for a moment, then gave a short nod. Tom nodded back. They rested under a rock ledge as the sun reached its highest point. Leary took out the map and traced the path. "We are close to the canyon," she said. After that, the path curves toward the valley. Some of the elders still looked unsure. They had lost much. It was hard to believe in something they could not see. But the food had stretched longer than expected. The water Tom found gave them strength. His calm way gave them comfort. The journey continued. 2 days later, they reached a wide, open space between two cliffs. The ground was white and full of broken bones. The air was dry and still. "The Canyon of Bones," Nara whispered. "Many tried to cross here before. Most did not return." The canyon stretched far across the land. The bridge once used had fallen long ago. The gap was wide. The drop below was full of sharp rocks. The people began to panic. Voices rose. One, "Father wanted to turn back." A mother cried softly. Tom stepped forward. He studied the cliffs. Then he walked away from the group and followed the edge. For half an hour, he searched. Then he waved his hand and called for Leary. She ran to him. He pointed down a slope that curved around the canyon. It was steep, but passable. He drew in the dirt again, showing how the path circled the drop and reached the other side. Leary smiled. He found another way, she told the group. It is longer, but safe. The people began to move. Step by step, they followed the path down the slope. Some slipped, but Tom helped each one. The children were quiet now. They trusted the man who walked in front of danger without fear. When they reached the other side of the canyon, the people stopped and looked back. The canyon of bones was behind them. They had crossed where others had failed. That night, there was music. Soft humming, old Vayari songs sung by the fire. Leary sat beside Tom and handed him a warm root cake. He took it with thanks. You gave them hope, she said. He looked at the stars. Then he picked up a stick and began to draw again. Lines for rivers, marks for safe places, a symbol for the valley. He never stopped planning. Leary watched the drawing take shape. She knew then that he had not just given them a path, he had given them a future. The group moved quietly through the new trail Tom had found. The steep slope tested their strength, but they trusted his steps. Tom walked ahead, checking the rocks and guiding each person down. Leary stayed close behind, helping the weaker ones. The path curved like a ribbon around the deep canyon. From above, the bones of old creatures looked like broken statues. Their hollow shapes rested under the sun, untouched for years. The place felt like a warning from the past. No one spoke much. Only the sound of careful feet on stone and the soft breaths of travelers filled the air. By the time they reached the other side, the sun had started to fall. The land beyond the canyon was open and dry, but it felt different. The wind was softer. The air smelled of dust and faint moisture. Tom led them to a large rock with a flat side. He knelt and drew again. He showed the next stage of the path. The valley was near, but between them and the valley was a sharp ridge and a stretch of dangerous land filled with heat cracks and soft ground. Leary explained his drawings to the group. She had started to understand his signs more clearly now. We go around the fire pits, she said. He marked places where the ground is weak. We must move in single line and only in morning light. The elders nodded. Even Var accepted the plan without words. They rested that night under the shadow of the rock wall. Tom shared dried roots he had found and passed out small water tablets that made the last drops clean. The families were tired, but less afraid. Now, before sleep, Leary sat with Tom. She looked at the stars. Why do you know this land so well? She asked. Tom took out a small device from his belt. It had a cracked screen and a blinking light. He pointed at it, then at the sky, then back at the map. Leary understood. He had studied this place, maybe even before her people had fallen into suffering. He had planned more than they thought. The next morning, the group woke early. The air was cooler, but the land ahead was still dangerous. They reached the edge of the fire pits by mid-morning. The ground here was broken with long black cracks. Some areas looked smooth but crumbled when touched. Tom moved slowly, testing each step. He placed small stones to mark safe ground. The group followed in silence, one by one. A child cried when his foot slipped near a crack. Tom turned quickly and caught him before he fell. The mother whispered thanks and held the child close. As they crossed, a loud sound echoed across the land, a sudden rumble from beneath their feet. The group froze. A large part of the ground behind them gave way. Dust and smoke rose into the air. The last two travelers were stuck on the wrong side. Tom ran back. He reached the edge and threw down a long cloth rope. The two climbed one by one as the ground continued to break. When they were safe, Tom led them away quickly. They did not stop. Until they reached harder land, everyone sat down. Some cried. Others held hands. Var walked to Tom. For the first time, he placed his hand on Tom's shoulder. "You saved all of us," Var said. Tom gave a small nod. He did not smile, but his eyes were calm. That evening, Leary gathered dry grass and built a strong fire. The group warmed themselves and shared their last supplies. The healer Nara came to Tom and wrapped a cloth around his arm. He had scraped it during the rescue. He stayed quiet during the treatment, only giving her a slight nod when she finished. Later, he picked up a stick and drew again. This time, the lines were different. He showed the ridge ahead and beyond it, a deep curve in the land. He tapped that spot 3 times. Leary looked at it carefully. "He says that is the place," she said. "The valley. Water is there." A murmur went through the group. One elder spoke. "If this is true, then we are almost at the end." Tom stood and looked at the ridge. He touched the drawing, then pointed at the stars. He made a circle with his hand. "He says we reach it after one more full turn of the sky," Leary explained. The group prepared. They had come far, lost nothing, gained hope. The next day would decide everything. Before sleeping, Leary looked at Tom as he sat watching the fire. "You gave us more than a path," she said. "You gave us strength." Tom said nothing. He simply nodded and drew one more line in the dirt. It led forward, always forward. The sun was still below the hills when the group started to move. Shadows stretched across the land. The wind carried dust, but not as strong as before. Tom walked at the front, with Leary beside him. Behind them followed the families, quiet, but ready. They had crossed broken land, survived dry storms, and passed the Canyon of Bones. Now only one ridge remained between them and the valley Tom had promised. As they climbed the slope, the air changed. It was thinner and cold. The wind came from the west, strong and fast. Dust scratched their faces. Leary held her scarf over her mouth and shouted, "We must move faster. The wind is turning." Tom pointed to the rocks ahead. There was a small path between 2 cliffs. He moved quickly and helped others cross the narrow opening. The ridge grew sharper. Climbing became harder. Some stones fell under their feet. A young boy slipped, but Var caught him and pulled him up. Clouds began to gather in the sky, thick red clouds. They spun like coils. Then a strange sound echoed across the land. A deep hum followed by loud cracks. Leary looked up. "Something is wrong. The sky is not normal." Tom stopped and stared at the clouds. His face stayed calm, but he moved faster. He turned and waved his hand, motioning everyone to hurry. Then it happened. A flash of red light streaked across the sky. It struck the land far behind them. The ground shook. A second flash followed, louder than thunder. The sky burned for a moment, then turned darker. Screams rose from the group. Children cried. Parents shouted names. Another blast struck nearby. A wall of hot wind pushed them forward. Dust flew into their eyes. Leary fell to the ground, covering her head. Tom pulled her up and pointed to a large crack in the ridge wall, a shallow cave. He guided her inside, then ran back into the storm. He grabbed 2 more children and carried them in. Var followed with the others, shielding them with his arms. The group packed tightly into the cave. Dust and heat filled the air outside. The light faded, replaced by flickering red glows. Inside, Leary coughed and wiped her eyes. "Is this a storm or something else?" she asked. No one answered. Tom stepped outside and looked at the sky. He held his small device and tapped it. The screen blinked with strange signs. When he came back in, his face was hard. He knelt in the dirt and drew again. He showed the ridge their position and a path curving down the other side. He made a sign for danger above the ridge and pointed toward the lower trail. "He says we must move when the sky clears," Leary said. Staying here will not help. We are still in danger. They waited in silence. Outside, the sky groaned, like a wounded beast. After what felt like hours, the red light faded. The clouds broke apart. A soft wind passed. Tom stepped out and checked the air. Then he nodded. The group followed him again, this time with more fear. They moved quickly. Each step felt heavier. Leary helped an elder walk. Nara carried two small children. Var stayed at the back, watching the sky. The trail down the ridge was narrow but clear. The fire in the sky did not return. Only the sound of dust under feet and soft breathing remained. By sunset, they reached the base of the ridge. The ground here was darker, cracked but not broken. They stopped near a dead tree and rested. Some cried. Others sat in silence. Elder Sen had been injured. A rock had hit his leg during the storm. He lay near the fire, wrapped in cloth. Nara checked him and said, "He needs water and rest. We must find shelter soon." Leary sat beside Tom. Her face was tired and covered in dust. "We could have died," she said. Tom looked at her, then at the group. He picked up a stick and drew in the dirt again. This time, the lines were soft. A curve for a valley. A drop for water. A sun above it. He placed a stone at the end of the path. Leary touched the drawing. "We are close, aren't we?" Tom nodded. He pointed ahead. One more walk. One more day. That night, the fire was small, but their hearts were full. Even after the storm, no one spoke of turning back. They had survived something few could explain. In the silence, Leary stood and looked at the stars. They were not clear, but she could see shapes between the dust. Tom walked beside her. He handed her a small fruit he had kept in his pack. She smiled. "You always think ahead, don't you?" He did not answer. He simply looked toward the land ahead. Tomorrow, they would see if the valley truly waited for them. The morning air was cool and soft as the group began their last climb. The ridge they had crossed gave way to a wide plain filled with stones and dry grass. Tom walked ahead, his eyes scanning the land. Leary followed closely. Behind them, the families moved slowly but with hope in their steps. The valley was close. Tom's drawings had shown it clearly. But when they reached the edge of the plain, the sight was not what they had hoped for. The valley looked dry and empty. Cracked earth stretched as far as the eye could see. No water sparkled in the sun. No green leaves waved in the wind. Some of the people gasped. The children looked scared. Leary stepped forward and touched the dry ground. "This is not the valley we dreamed of," she said softly. Tom knelt and drew again in the dirt. He made marks that looked like waves, then pointed to the sky and to the ground. He tapped the soil twice. He motioned for shovels. The people brought tools and began to dig near a low ridge where Tom had pointed. Hours passed. The sun climbed, high. Sweat ran down faces. The earth was hard and dry, but they kept digging. Then, suddenly, water appeared. Clear, cold water bubbled from the ground. The children laughed and splashed. The elders smiled. Tom smiled too, but it was quiet. He watched the water carefully. The people worked fast. They built small canals to bring water to the dry fields. They planted seeds from their packs and from the old village stores. Leary helped carry water to the plants. She looked at Tom. "You knew it was here," she said. He nodded. He had seen it in his maps. He had believed in this land even when the people had doubts. Days passed. The valley changed. Small green shoots appeared where the soil was soft and wet. Birds returned. The air smelled of rain and life. The Veyari began to build new homes. They used stones and wood from the old ruins. Children ran and played near the water. Tom helped in small ways. He fixed broken tools. He showed the people how to build small dams to keep the water flowing. He drew plans in the dirt for new fields and paths. One evening, as the sun set, Leary sat beside Tom near the water's edge. The sky was bright orange and purple. "Thank you," she said. Tom looked at her and smiled softly. He pointed at the stars and then at her heart. "You saved us too," she said. Tom did not speak, but his eyes held a quiet warmth. The valley was alive again. The Veyari had hope, and it was because a human, who had once been a stranger, had drawn a map in the dirt and led them home. The valley had changed. Green leaves waved in the warm wind. Flowers bloomed near the clear water. The sun shone bright and soft. Leary stood on a small hill and looked over the new home of her people. Families built houses from wood and stone. Children laughed and played in the fields. The Veyari had returned. Tom stood beside her. His clothes were dusty, his face tired but calm. He watched the valley with quiet eyes. The people had learned many things from him. They had learned to read the stars again. They had learned to plant seeds with care. They had learned to build strong shelters. Leary smiled. She remembered the day she first saw Tom, a stranger, alone and silent. Now he was a guide, a friend, a part of their story. One morning, the Veyari gathered near the water. Elder Sin stood before them. His voice was strong. "We were lost," he said. "But now we have hope. We have life." He looked at Tom. This man came from another world. He did not speak our words well, but he spoke with his heart. He showed us a path when we saw none. The people cheered softly. Tom stepped forward. He drew in the dirt one last time. This time, the lines were not just a path. They were a plan for the future, a plan for trade and peace with other tribes, a plan to grow and protect the valley for many years to come. Leary touched Tom's shoulder. "You are family now," she said. Tom smiled. It was the first real smile he had shown. The days passed, seasons changed, the valley grew stronger. One night, under a sky full of stars, Tom sat with Leary. She asked, "Will you stay with us?" He looked at the stars, then at her. He nodded, slowly. The Veyari had found their home again, and the human who drew a map in the dirt had found a family. In the quiet valley, life began anew.